Welcome to the Money Huddle, a podcast that explores financial topics for families and small business owners. Hosted by Michael Baker and Ross Marinell. All opinions expressed by Michael and Ross or any podcast guests are solely their own opinions and may not reflect the opinions of Planners Alliance. The podcast recording is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Planners Alliance may maintain positions in securities discussed on the program.
To the Money Huddle. My name is Michael Baker, and I'm here with Ross Marinell, my co-host. Ross, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm doing wonderful. So, I hear it was fun times happening in the Marinell household this week.
Dude, if you didn't know, new kids on the block came to town.
The new kids.
My wife was fired up.
So Nancy went?
Yeah, she went out there with a friend from the neighborhood.
No, new kids. So I think I asked you this, but which one was her favorite? Do you remember?
I think it was one of the
that's
brothers.
the boy band question. You got to know who the
I
favorite.
think it's one of the brothers. I don't think it's Donnie Wahlberg.
Jordan John. Oh,
yeah,
Donnie
one
Wahlberg.
of those two.
So Donnie Wahlberg, that was my sister's favorite.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my sister was nuts about New Kids on the Block back when we were growing up, and Donnie Wahlberg was. I mean, he was it. He was it in our household. There was no other one but Donnie.
Well, apparently they're still putting butts in seats because they sold out the Spectrum Center, and it's just funny. So my wife was kind of recapping it. She's like,
Yeah.
you know, they said it was a good show. You know, like kind of get out in the crowd, interact a little bit. But she said something that stuck with me. She said, you know, at one point they said, you know, we've been doing. Can you feel the love? We've been doing this for 30 years.
30
and
years.
Just like, oh my gosh, 30 years singing the same 10 songs or whatever that were popular.
Yeah, I know.
And just it's so funny because, you know, obviously we're talking about retirement planning topics on this podcast, and we always say what's the best thing to do? We'll start early, stick with it, have grit, and
be devilishly handsome. Be devilishly handsome.
Right. That helps. But, you know,
have some singing
look,
and dancing talent.
You got to give it to these guys. They've been doing it for 30 years.
Oh, I know.
They stuck with their plan.
Gosh, yeah,
and they're making money.
What I thought the funniest thing to me about it was actually Donnie Wahlberg. I mean, he's got a legitimate acting career.
Right.
I mean, he's
Band of Brothers.
Serious.
Yeah.
And he came out and went right back into the Donnie Wahlberg character of New Kids on the Block. He's like, I ain't scared. I'm going right back at it.
50 years. He's gonna be 50 years old this year. Still singing boy band songs, but you know what? It's working for him.
You know what?
They stuck to their plan.
I bet you his bank account does not mind one bit if
All
they're
right,
selling out
enough
arenas.
of New Kids on the Block. So what do you got for us this week?
Well, there was an article that came out not that long ago, a couple days ago. I'm getting caught up on some stuff after the 4th of July holiday, but it was an article with Investment News, and it's got a long title, but it's something that we talk about constantly, I feel like, with some of our clients. And the title of the article is "Women Whose Spouses Control the Finances May Be Putting Themselves, Their Families at Risk." And, the initial, the article starts out talking about, for a lady after 40 years of marriage taking a back seat. And she was thinking that they were destitute for the most part. And I guess when she got divorced, she learned that they had more than $10 million in investments.
Wow.
And so, she had been basically kept completely in the dark about their financial situation. And obviously that story talks about divorce, but I think more about just when you lose a spouse, like if a spouse passes away, like the husband passes away,
right,
and the widow now has to sort through this entire quagmire of financial stuff that they don't have any experience with, don't know where accounts are, don't know what money is where, what money they even have in some cases. And so it's, for sure,
I think even taking a step back just a little further, before we even get to kind of that end stage, it is this idea of how do we combine finances as a couple?
Right.
And when should you do it? And what might be some reasons why you would hold off on
I think
doing
that's a
it?
phenomenal talking point and discussion, especially for younger families, even just married couples. But even you can kind of get by a little bit early on, like when it's just you two and you're fresh out of the gate.
Right.
But as complexity arises with life, as it does, you got to have some things sorted.
So I was thinking about this just to kick it off. Like, what might prompt some reasons why you would keep your finances separate? So let's just take that young couple getting off on a relationship together.
Right.
What would keep them? What might be some things that would keep them from wanting to combine their finances? So I've got a few ideas on this.
Yeah, I mean, at first glance, I could see it like, having a joint checking account, but also maybe having a separate checking account. Like if certain bills are getting paid out of one account, or you have your one check direct deposited. Everybody does it different. A lot of people do it differently. Some people, it's all in one pot. Some people have multiple pots, and it's just how do you sync everything up.
I think too, though, just like, why would you be careful about combining finances? So the first thing that sticks out to me is young couples getting married. They could have vastly different debt circumstances and debt obligations, and specifically thinking about college loans.
Sure.
And
like, this is your debt. You're paying it.
Well, just think,
because if you get married,
what if you've been frugal through college and paid your way,
right? And
you have $15,000 or $20,000 in student loan debt, and your partner has $90,000.
Hopefully, your partner is a surgeon or something.
Well, we've seen from experience
right.
that's not always the case. So I'm just trying to think of some reasons why a couple might be hesitant to just go all in, and I think having significantly different debt obligations could be one of those.
I think
cautionary.
But I think, though, I guess my take on that is you need to sort that out before you get married, right? Like, after you get married, isn't the time to find out that your partner has $90,000 in student loan debt.
Right, but it might
be
one
of
those
that
reasons
before.
why you decide to keep your finances separate. And I'll kind of along those same lines, I
Sure.
think, too. Well, if one partner has bad credit or a history of delinquency,
correct.
Do you want to co-sign loans with them? Do you want to co-sign an auto loan with somebody that has a history of not paying their bills on time?
Maybe not.
Right. So that could be a reason why you might want to split your financial decisions to some degree, right? But then, what if there's just like different spending habits? How do you parse that if one person is very conservative and frugal?
Yeah. So where I have seen this come up the most is usually not in a first marriage. It's usually in a second or a third marriage where the finances are separate, and there's yours, mine, and ours type of like mental accounting. And in some of those instances, it does make sense, because especially if there's kids involved, we have met with a lot of couples that are in their second marriage, and there are kids maybe on one side or both sides, where it's like, hey, there's an understanding. You're going to take care of your kids. I'm going to take care of my kids. We love each other, but they're not my kids are not their financial responsibility, and vice versa.
Right.
Or like some debts, parents that have co-signed on student loan debt for their kids, and they're in a second marriage. The new partner isn't necessarily wanting or planning to take on any of that responsibility. I think there are just about as many different combinations as we could imagine exist, but I would say for a first marriage, it makes sense to me. You want to be as much in tune and in sync as you possibly can. That doesn't mean that, you don't have an account that you use, but I think there should be a lot of things like for me, for example, like being the financial person in our household, right? A lot of the account stuff I'm left to do, and Elizabeth and I will talk about things, and she'll, but one of the things I love about Elizabeth is she frees her mind of a lot of stressful things, and then she'll check in with me. I'm like, okay, all right, we need to do this, this, and this. Are we good? And we'll have a little power conference, and we make a lot of financial decisions together.
Right.
But the day-to-day running of that stuff is kind of left to me, and then there are some people that it's like everything. I've heard couples where every decision is like a joint, you got to have a committee meeting.
Yeah, that could be a little painstaking, but I
agree.
kind of thought too, like, so a few reasons why we discussed that you might be concerned.
Sure.
But then like you said, there's some reasons why you would want to share your finances together and find that common ground. Obviously, if you share financial goals,
Sure.
and you talk about how much are we committed to, let's say, saving each year, and you're
Right.
hitting those savings goals together, and you have how I would almost classify it as like a mutual effort in helping move the household forward, right? It may
Right.
not be you're both working full time, but maybe it's one parent is dedicated to helping with the children and they're working, and that's a grueling day, right?
Right.
And the other parent is working, where it's mutual effort, right?
Sure.
You're working together in unison to get that household along. And you kind of need each other to really maximize your savings and the financial security.
Well, it's like to use this term, but it's a team effort, and it's like not all, you think of a sport, right? There's usually only one point guard on the floor. There's one power forward, one person center, or hey, you don't like that analogy? Let's go to football. There's one quarterback. There's, one center. There's different positions, and so that's part of it. Is you find a way to sync up your system in your house where it works.
Right.
The key is just, to me, is that open communication and transparency, which is what I think this article's talking about. Is I don't think the issue is so much that it's written as though, well, she never was involved. She didn't even know. Like, she had no idea, and I think that's bad.
That's not.
She's not a participant.
That's not common. That's extreme, and a good story to look for. Right, raise awareness if you're seeing those things happening where a married couple's on a strict budget and you're not certain what the total household picture looks like. That's cause for concern.
Right. Well,
right out of the gate.
I mean, let's be honest, we've had meetings over the years where we've had prospective clients come in, and the dynamic is very similar, where it's generally the husband. Okay. The husband runs everything, and it doesn't really matter what the wife says now. And that's usually a deal breaker for us. Right. We don't. So, but we have seen that. We have experienced that.
Not usually. That just is.
Yeah. Well.
But yeah,
that just is a deal breaker, is what he means.
Here, I want to kind of circle back though,
okay.
From the extreme back to just kind of normal. Like, so we're sharing our let's say expenses as a household, right? We're kind of building this together. I think one of the advantages to that is what's happening today is not always going to be what's going to happen 5 years from now or 10 years from now.
Sure.
So to kind of give you an example, if let's say you're earning a little bit more money than your spouse, and you're thinking, man, I'm paying more to the bills and I'm putting more in the savings account, and then a month later, boom, you lose your job. Guess what? Now your spouse is driving the income engine, and you're trying to scramble to find something else. So, this has happened within our own household where it's shifted from period over period, period of time, like who is driving more income in the house. And I think being unified as a team is, it's comforting knowing that, hey, listen, if something happens where I do have a job change, like my personal livelihood may not be fully on the hook, right? I've got someone to work with,
sure,
to help keep the engine going while maybe you get your feet back on the ground.
So what are some ways that we could propose to, and I'm thinking more, I guess it could be applied across the board, because it's never too late to start. But I mean, like for our younger families, younger couples that may be, needing some tips on how to talk about money or get more integrated with their finances. What are some things that come to your mind?
So just getting the communication going.
Sure.
Hey, I am a rip the Band-Aid kind of guy.
Yeah.
I think you just got to dive in.
Yeah.
No fluff. Just talk about it. Lay it all on the table and say, this is what I've got. And just be honest about, look, this is what I owe.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what my college loans are. Here's what my credit card debt is. Here's, what I think I'm gonna be able to generate an income, and just talk about it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think there are some ways, though, if you're not at that level yet or not ready to share yet, but you do want to have some shared expenses, and you want to, every person or each person to participate. Like you said, start with a joint checking account and fund it. And if you fund it equally, so every month, let's say you each put $2,000 into this joint account, and that covers the rent, the utilities, the gas, the electric, and so on. That's at least a way to get started.
Right.
so that both people are contributing. Someone who makes a little bit more money maybe doesn't feel burned, and you can get to that level where you're confident enough and comfortable with each other enough to really have a more detailed conversation. But that's probably the easiest thing to do without opening up all of your finances. It's just say, hey, listen, let's open a joint checking account. We'll each fund it.
Right.
That covers our bills each month. And then as you get a little more into the relationship, decide how much if you're ready to start really sharing.
Yeah. So I think, one way to start is what are the shared goals, like you mentioned, like that we want to accomplish. So, thinking about just different phases of life. All right. Newlywed couple tends to probably want to buy a house or, have a house. So, okay. What kind of house do we want? Where do we want to live? What's our budget? What can we afford?
Sure. What's a comfortable down
How
payment?
are we gonna pay for this? And then you get into a house comes with bills. Like what makes sense for us to pay the bills? So when you have couples where both incomes are relatively stable, like say W-2 income, consistent pay periods, that can be easier than let's say a couple that one spouse has consistent income and one spouse has very variable income.
Right.
So you have to kind of work through that. And I think the key is like working on a foundation, but then you move into, all right, now do we want to start a family? Like, all right, we're going to have children. When you bring kids into the mix, does one person, does mom want to stay home?
Yeah.
Or how do we pay for childcare? How can we afford? Because childcare, man, childcare.
Well, I think those
expensive.
are the choices, right? Who stays home? Who's got the more consistent income?
Sure.
The higher income. Maybe it's the dad that stays home and avoids, and the family avoids the $10,000, $12,000 a year in childcare expenses.
Yeah.
It could be any of those circumstances. But ultimately, I think the goal would be, as you transition in, maybe you start with a joint account, get comfortable sharing
Right.
bills, build a budget together, have some savings goals together, achieve those to ultimately get to the point where you can go all in.
Yeah.
So I think one of the major benefits of having a dual income household is that just being all in general is maybe you do have that one spouse that drives the majority of the income, but that other spouse is helping around the house, child care, and that helps both of those individuals have the life they want.
Yeah, no question. I mean, so obviously the key is open communication. Get it out there, because I think that the longer something like this goes with unchecked or unexplored in a relationship, it becomes the status quo. And we kind of cling to, like, people have status quo bias. So the longer something has been a certain way, the harder it's going to be to change down the road. So if you've been doing it for 15, 20 years one way, and then all of a sudden, like, nope, we need to change it. Like that's going to create, I think, more stress and strife than just diving in, as you would say, right out of the gate and getting it
Here's
going.
my favorite all-in strategy.
Okay.
Both spouses working, one spouse covers all the bills, the other spouse, all their income is saved.
I like it.
That would be the dream goal. But here's the problem. I think it's critical to get to the all-in together phase before retirement.
No doubt.
Because that can become very problematic.
Well, because then it's, the thing is, and we've seen this too play out, where the one spouse that may have been working, driving the cart, is like ready to retire. And the other spouse is like, no, you can't retire because, we can't afford it. And then there can be some resentment that builds up there. So I think the key is like getting yourself on that path, so that just as you go through those different phases of life, you can have those conversations, because it doesn't get easier. That's the one thing I can say. It only gets more complex and complicated.
Think about this. If it's a what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours mentality,
right?
And you have a pension and you choose a single life option to maximize the income to you, and you don't think about the continuation of that income if you die.
Right.
I think that's a huge problem. That's probably a little bit more common than we want to believe. I think it's the same thing about some of the annuity programs. Is it based on you and your life, or is it based on the house, you and your spouse?
Mm-hmm.
If it's selected incorrectly, that could mean the end of that income. If that person, that owner of that passes away.
Yeah.
Again, think about just your Social Security benefits. If someone had a higher earned income through their working career, they're going to have a larger Social Security income. If you stayed out of the workforce for 10 or 15 years to help raise children, and now you re-enter the workforce, but you can't make up the lost time, you now have a smaller Social Security benefit. So are we going to live on our checks?
Right.
Where I live on the smaller Social Security check, and then you get to live and howl in the hog and do what you want on your larger Social Security check? Or are we going to work together?
Yeah, I know. So I think there's definite pieces to take away from everybody in different phases of life. I think for your younger couples, hopefully before you even get married, you've had these conversations about like, how are we going to do our money? Like, what are you bringing to the table? Look, I love you, but I want to know what you're bringing to the table, and you love me, but you want to know what I'm bringing to the table, and what it's going to look like for us. Because hey, we're getting ready to integrate 2 lives, so we need to do that. And then when you begin a family and you have kids, and how are we going to raise our kids? Because one of the things, and I had this thought a few minutes ago, was so much of our money stuff is caught like when we're growing up, like from our parents. Mm-hmm. And so some of the best money lessons that you could give your kids is the kids watching you guys interact and how you handle money, how you talk about money, how you approach the different financial topics, because the kids are always watching and listening. And they're just gleaning. So whenever you're, and I just remember.
And they repeat back.
Well, I remember, when I was a kid, going in the family, going somewhere to eat, like it was always like, we can't afford to go there, which was a joke, right? But it was just always like, so that kind of was in my head for the longest time. Like, I can't afford that. I can't afford that. I shouldn't go eat there. I can't afford that. Just
right.
And those money scripts get kind of ingrained in the next generation. So I think, when you start to have a family, there's all these topics, that financial, responsibilities that come with having children, but also that responsibility of like, okay, here's what we've learned. Here's what we don't want our kids to repeat. Here's the attitudes and the mentality we want our kids to have about money. And then hopefully they go off into the world, and then you move into the new phase of the empty nester and saying, okay, now what does this phase for us look like? Let's start really refining our retirement goals and looking at what that's going to be like. What do we want that life to be like?
Right.
And what do we need to do now, you and me, as a couple, as a team? How do we work together to get us there?
Right.
And that may mean like what you're talking about. That may mean you claim a pension a certain way. That may mean you coordinate your Social Security
we make
a certain
sacrifices
way.
For each other.
Exactly.
You're going to claim a pension and you're going to get a little less money, but it's going to protect your surviving spouse in the event that you pass away before them. Those are the decisions that I think a unified couple make, and offers that a little bit more financial security down the road. Right. But yeah, there's a cost to that, right? Which is maybe a little bit less today to have that extra protection.
So when you mentioned this topic that you want to talk about, it's funny because I had a conversation the other week, and a brand new potential client come in the office, and we're sitting down, we're going through just our regular initial consultation, nothing too formal, just talking about, goals, opportunities, what they really desired in a relationship, how they thought I could help. And it was very clear that the husband was very much directing their investments. No problem with that, but he was pretty much driving the boat. There was no co-pilot. He was the pilot. And one of the things was, he said, well, tell me really how you can help me, and what can we do? And, the first thing that popped in my head was, okay, let's pretend for a minute that you're no longer here. What is she going to do?
Right.
Because if she has no experience with investing, doesn't pick the investments, you pick the investments in your 401k and her 401k, you pick the investments in your IRA, her IRA, you've handled all the finances, you paid all the bills, you've done everything. She's never done any of that really. And then you're gone. What does she do? I was like, do you not want her to have someone trusted that she can reach out to, and you've got a plan in place for her? so that and she knows that she's going to be taken care of. And it's like, to me, that's like common sense, but sometimes it's like you have to bang a gong. Like, do you not understand? It's like, we get this invincibility, when people talk about young kids, like, oh, they think they're invincible, doing crazy stuff, like, with, speeding in cars and riding dirt bikes. And then it's like these boomer couples, it's like, you're never going to, it's not possible that you could die unexpectedly, or you know what I mean, or you could get hurt, or disabled. Anything.
Back to the beginning.
Crazy.
Started off right.
Get
something mutual agreement together of how we're going to share expenses, and then build that framework for hopefully reaching a comfortable all-in strategy down the road.
Sorry, I was getting a little worked up. Get passionate. I get passionate about that stuff, man. All right. So, what's next on the docket?
So we had a listener question about
yes.
Why?
Shout out to our listener Eric.
Yes. So why am I getting all of these advertisements in my social media feed related to these savings accounts that sort of round up your balances?
Right. Oh, all the apps now.
All the apps that
savings
take
apps.
Your purchases and then round it up to the nearest dollar. These sort of savings mechanisms that take, a few cents.
Right.
Each transaction, stuff it into some type of savings account.
So there are a few that I know off the top of my head. Which ones did you look at?
So I looked most specifically at Chime. And there are a few other very popular ones: Acorns, Digit,
Stash is a big one.
Stash is a big one. But basically, go ahead with your kind of impression of some.
Well, first of all, we're going to talk about these as generally as we can. In no way are we making a recommendation to go sign up for one of these. This is just us giving our 30,000 foot view of what we think of these. First of all, I'll say I think it's really cool what technology is enabling to do. I was telling someone the other day that I do not go in a bank anymore, unless the bank has set it up where for whatever I need to accomplish, I have to physically walk into a bank. I don't go into a bank. I literally can do everything from my laptop or my phone, which I love. And I think we've talked about this in the office that brick and mortar banks, these banks they're under fire because some of these technology platforms are really cool and they're only getting more innovative.
It may take time. Remember, some of this progress
it's a generational
is
thing. Yeah, but
I can't imagine in 10 years what the banking industry is going to look like.
It could be crazy.
So I think the reason why we're seeing a lot of these advertisements sprinkled in our social media feeds is this is
everybody sells your data. So if you've been looking at investing sites or whatever, they're going to sell your data so they can target you.
Well, they have a great opportunity here to take advantage of some of the new or younger savers that are building accounts, because a lot of the brick and mortar banks aren't paying great interest rates on savings checking accounts.
That's a kind way to say
it
that
is
they're
a very
paying
kind way
nothing.
to say that it's still astonishingly to look at some of those.
Yeah.
And so what a great opportunity to attract people in that aren't that focused on having a brick and mortar location, that are more willing to use an app.
If you're comfortable with technology, there's neat opportunities out there for sure. But
right, I would struggle to find a reason if you were comfortable with technology, the app, why you would still need to use a brick and mortar location. There aren't very many circumstances that would require that.
Yeah. And
so a company like Chime that is actually it's pretty much a bank, an online app that has an automatic savings program.
Mm-hmm.
And there's incentives. They have some level of incentive, right? If you save enough money, we'll give you a bonus up to X amount of dollars.
Right.
Or some of them have trading platforms where you could end up building a savings balance that you could then invest, and they could have compensation coming from some of the investment of the assets or trading charges. And so there's underlying profit. Chime, for example, uses a Chime Visa debit card where you get this debit card when you have your account there.
Okay.
As you swipe it, they make processing fees.
Sure.
Right. So that's how they earn. I mean, these banks are, they're going to earn an income, but that's kind of what they're doing, right? To generate revenue for themselves. But look, if that helps somebody get a savings account built, that's just sort of mindless, right? Every time you swipe it, money goes into your savings account.
Mm-hmm.
You use it enough over the course of a year, you might end up saving a substantial, a decent enough money that you want to put it into some type of an investment.
Yeah. So I mean, my initial take on it is, I think it's neat. Obviously, I guess it's somewhat innovative. I don't know, but to me, there's a couple ways I look at it. One is, there's some beauty in simplicity and not having 15,000 things out there where like, well, I got this app for this and I got this app for that and I got this account here and I got that account here, and there are people that are, continually like, we've heard about it with credit cards, people churning credit cards, trying to get the new bonus on, points here, or they're going to offer a different rate here. And they're constantly jumping around with, balance transfers and stuff like that. And I think that to some extent, this is the same way because, first of all, if you're talking about the change of a transaction, how much money is that really over the course of a year? I don't know. That's going to be highly personal. For some households it sounds great, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to be a whole lot of money for others. But the first thought I had when I was like, where is the one that does that for debt? Right? Where's the one that rounds up your change of instead of investing it in fractional shares of, ABC fund, say, hey, we're going to send, we're going to round up the change and every month we're going to put this extra payment on your student loan debt. Or
there you go. It'll be out there
or your auto loan debt or your mortgage.
Yeah. Well,
right. Where's that?
Well, to answer our listener's question, just in the most simple way, if the banks are going to be paying, 0.01, 0.02, 0.05 on a savings account, and whatever your bank is, right? I'm just making a general assumption that some of the interest rates are pretty low. Then these companies like Chime and Acorns and the other one you mentioned have an opportunity to gain market share, because if they're going to improve on that, then it's a willing, kind of an open market.
I think it comes down to the end game of is it to build savings? Yeah. Because if it's savings, you could do that with an online bank. And like kind of like what you were saying with Chime, I guess is, but I know like Acorns and Stash, like those are like entry level ways to kind of get your feet wet with investing, so to speak. And if you have a lot of transactions where this loose change or rounding up would be helping you build an investment account, but to me, I'm like, I don't know. I think I'm more of, hey, if we're going to be investors, let's really be investors, and let's be intentional about. Let's not throw our change in the hat.
This is also it's a simple way,
right,
without thinking about it, to put money aside.
Right. So I mean, I think you take it on a case by case basis. I know some people that I follow on Twitter and stuff. They speak highly of Acorns as a neat little app, but for the most part, I don't know that. I think it's neat. I don't know that this really moves the needle. I think this is a very very beginner entry level way to start putting a little money aside and, maybe having some shares of something.
Maybe the savings component of it, but as far as the internet banking, to get higher yield, to get away from the brick and mortar,
that's here to stay.
100, that is rolling.
Yeah, that's here to stay.
Yep.
All right. So thanks again for the question, my man Eric, reaching out. And always thank you guys for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Give us some love on social media if you can. And as always, we'll talk to you next time.